Sealing this apple wood with some anchor seal bought me some time, but now it has started to crack, and that means it's time to get serious about roughing these out into bowl blanks. Alright, I've actually planned on doing a couple other videos before I got back to this apple wood from that apple tree. But it seems like the apple wood has a mind of its own and started cracking, even though I tried to buy some time by sealing it with anchor seal or something equivalent to anchor seal. So instead, I'm going to be turning this. This is one of the pieces that I have planned to turn into a natural edge bowl because the bark is in pretty good condition. And the crack, I'm hoping, since this is going to be the bottom of the bowl right in the center, I'm hoping I can cut away all of this crack so it won't be a problem. Now, how do you go about mounting a natural edge bowl? And I do it a little bit different. I used to do it the same way as other turners. And the way that most turners will do is I'll mount this between centers, and as they rough it down, they'll keep checking the height of the wings and the height of the valleys, and they'll keep adjusting between centers to make them the same height, so that your wings are exactly symmetrical and the valleys are exactly symmetrical. And I used to do it that way, but one time I was having a hard time because the drive center kept on slipping and moving, and at some point I just gave up and said, forget about symmetrical wings, and I just took a faceplate and I slapped it on and I finished the bowl that way. And the wings were a little bit not quite symmetrical, but I found that it didn't really matter. I found it looked just fine that way. So I kept doing it that way, and I basically just don't mind. In fact, I rather like the idea of having the wings being a little bit asymmetrical. And I've even taken logs and purposely used them to get extremely asymmetrical wings on a natural edge bowl. So that's the way I mount them nowadays. Now, I could just slap this on and see what I get, or I can kind of try to get it mostly symmetrical, and that's what I'm going to do this time. And so what I'll do first with my faceplate is I want to center it along the length of the log and have it more or less balanced near the top of the log. And so you can just use a ruler. So I'll just make some rough measurements. It doesn't have to be perfectly centered. So about 2 3/8 there, and about 2 3/8 there. And then as far as centering it this way, I usually just eyeball it. We can see on this log, it's a little bit, it kind of narrows out on this side. So I've kind of projected this same curve on that side. So I really just want the center of that. And so what I'll do after I align the faceplate this way is I'll rotate it, and I'll just look down the end of the log and make a pretty good guess. And then notice also I have 2 of the holes lined up right on the, I guess that would be the pinnacle, is that the right word? The peak, the top is most part. And I will shooting a screw into this hole because that one's a little bit higher. And now one way you can go, if I could just shoot the other one in and just come up with an asymmetric wing, but if I want it to be a little bit more symmetrical, I can always use a level. And what I'll often do is just try to shim this with whatever I have. This is some 1/8 inch plywood, and then I can stick my other screw in. And so these first screws are about 1.5 inches. Should go more than deep enough to hold this level. And now, since there's a little bit of space on these holes, I'm just going to use extra long screws. And this time, I'm not going to screw them. I'm going to drive the screws almost all the way. And leave a little bit of slack at the end, and I'll show you why that is in just a second. All right, so I've left these 4 screws a little bit loose, and the reason I did that is if I want to try to make sure this is level, I can still play with the tension by hand with these last screws. So I want this to move over this way. I'll tighten these screws a little bit harder until I've got it pretty close to level. And that's pretty solid. That's not going anywhere. And even though that face place is probably more than secure, I never quite trust green wood until it's a little bit more balanced. And so even though it's probably not necessary to use a tailstock, I almost always use the tailstock initially with green wood. You never know what's going to happen with green wood. So I'm going to start roughing this out the same way, using that same cut, that pivoting cut, to get this closer to a round state. But I have to be a little bit careful because I don't want to break off this bark. And so now, as always, bring up the speed slowly, see if I can get it. Sometimes it'll start bouncing, but if you go a little bit faster, you might find a little spot where it calms down, and it looks like that's not happening today. So I'll get back down around 460 or so, and I'll start roughing this out. You may have noticed I switched left-handed. I remember somebody made a comment after I did the video on this pivoting cut, and they said they actually like to rough left-handed because it keeps you out of the line of fire. And I found it actually wasn't that difficult to do, and actually it was going to take a little bit more practice to get as good as I am right-handed. But it wasn't too bad because I'm using my whole body, and and I've got the tool right in my hip. So I think I'm going to start trying to rough out left-handed from now on. Now this is almost round, but I don't want to go all the way to the wing using this cut, because it's not too bad before. You can see it starts to tear out the bark a little bit, and I'm trying to keep the bark on. And so now I'm going to go back to my regular cross end grain cut, and I usually go from right to left. But as far as the wood's concerned, since I'm going straight across end grain, it doesn't matter if I go from right to left or left to right. But I usually go right to left because I'm right-handed, and that makes it easy. But in this case, that's going to tend to want to pry the bark off, and the whole point of natural edge is trying to keep it. So instead of doing my usual right to left, I'm going to come to the other side and do it from left to right. And hopefully, I'll manage to keep all the bark on. In fact, I'm even going to try to do it left-handed. Do I dare to do it left-handed? Let's see how it goes. And if you're not comfortable doing left-handed, you can always swing your body way over, still do it right-handed. And the whole idea is, when I'm cutting air like this, if you look at the bevel, the direction of the bevel is still the same regardless of whether there's wood or not. And so that's still my line that I cut. So line up the bevel in the direction you want to cut. And you might also notice I use my finger against the tool rest a lot. That helps me keep me from, when I'm trying to approach that bevel in the air like that, I don't tend to go in and out too much. It keeps me a nice reference point. I'm going to start turning this into more of a round shape, round bottom. But again, because I'm going with the grain, I risk, as I start to hit these valleys, I might start lifting up that bark. So it's a bit of a dilemma. I want to cut with the grain, but cutting with the grain might cause me trouble with the bark. Or I can cut against the grain and try to keep that bark on. So usually what I'll do is I'll go against the grain, because I'm not going to go too far into the grain. I'm not going to go 45. I might go just enough so I can get past that bark. So just like any time you cut against the grain, I want to try to get as much speed as I can, and I'm going to try to take very light cuts. Alright, and now that I've cleared the bark, I'll go ahead and finish this up the usual way, going from right to left. And I'm feeling pretty good about the stability of this. So I'm going to pull away the tailstock. Give me some access to the bottom now. And mark my tenon for when I turn it around. And you always want to make sure I don't touch that side. I want it to kick over. Whoop, like that. Alright, time to turn it around and hollow it out. Alright, all I need to do now is rough it out, but I need to address one thing real quick because I know someone's going to call me out on it. Normally when you have something chucked in a chuck, you want to have the gaps between the jaws about 1/8 of an inch or so, and between a 1/16 and 1/8 of an inch, and that will give you your best, most symmetrical circular grip around the bowl. So why do I have these open a little bit more? And the reason is because it's green wood, I can get away with it, and also because I know that tenon is going to shrink, and I may want to use the same chuck to reuse that tenon later on. And so I'm hoping that by the time I take off material after warping and drying, that I'll still be able to make a big enough tenon that I can, and at that time I'll have a tenon that will give me about 1/8 of an inch gap. Now as far as hollowing this out, it's just about the same as any other bowl, except that I'm still dealing with the fact that I'm be cutting a lot of air. And so it still comes out of the same thing. I want to line up my bevel, and I want to move the tool in the direction of that bevel, regardless of whether there's wood there to support the bevel or not. The upside of hollowing something with an irregular rim like this is that usually when you have a flat rim, if you make a mistake and you get that tip caught in just right, it wants to make a thread and it wants to skate back, and it'll ruin your rim. That pretty much doesn't happen. You'd have to really try to get that happen when you're cutting air on a rim like this on a natural edge bowl, because it needs to be continually, that tip needs to be continually stuck into the wood for it to continue to want to create a thread. So that's actually one upside of hollowing natural edge bowls. And now, since this is about, let's see how much I still have. This started out, this was a 9-inch log, and a lot of times with natural edge, yeah, you lose a little bit. So 8 inches. So divide by 10. It's a little over 3/4 of an inch. I need to leave at least 3/4 of an inch as my edge to give me enough leeway so that when it dries, I'll still have enough material that I can retrue the bowl. And so watch how that bevel, I move the tool in the direction of the bevel regardless of whether there's wood there or not. And as soon as you even start getting a little bit of wood, it gets a lot easier because you can use that little bit of wood contact for as feedback. You know you're moving the bevel correctly. Now when I'm hollowing bowls, I've always tried to go for an even thickness all the way down. But the last 2 demos ago, it was a Glenn Lucas demo, and he said he actually likes to get it a little bit thinner as it goes down, and that it's not a problem because as I get to a smaller diameter, I'm going to have less shrinkage. And for him, it's a big deal because the more he can remove green, that saves him time later on. But I'm thinking also for this natural edge bowl, usually the cracking will start on the bottom of the bowl because that's the part that's closest to pith. And in fact, when we started off, the reason I started doing these right away was I did have a crack in the bottom near the pith. And so I'm going to try it out. I'm going to try going just a little bit thinner. So about 3/4 of an inch here. Maybe I'll hit about a 1/2 an inch by the time I hit the bottom and see if that helps me with some cracking. Always willing to try something new if it's going to save me time and well, the pain of losing a bowl that I've worked so hard for. And now since this 40-degree bevel, I get to the bottom and I can no longer maintain bevel contact because of that 40 degrees, so I have to switch tools to something with a more blunt bevel. This tool has a 60 degree. It looks like 40 degrees because there's a relief bevel, but right at the tip is 60 degrees. That should get me right to the bottom of this bowl. The other option I could, because it is roughing out and I don't worry about too much, I could just use a scraper as well. Since that tool started to complain a little bit, I decided just to finish that little bit on the bottom with a scraper. And so it seems to get just a little bit thinner as I get to the bottom. And so we'll see how that works as far as drying goes. Alright, time to set it aside for drying. Now, I'm not going to alcohol dry this simply because I have a lot of dry blanks, and I'm probably not going to get to this for a while anyways, so I'm not going to spend the time trying to alcohol dry it. Now, when I do alcohol dry stuff, after it's been soaking, I usually wrap the back and the rim with some kind of paper, and I leave the inside open to dry. And the idea from the original article that I learned about alcohol drying was that that makes it dry from the inside out, and keeps the bowl under pressure. And so I've actually used the paper technique even when I'm not using alcohol drying. But I was thinking, because putting paper on can be a little bit of a pain, I've been experimenting with this set of wood to coat just the backside with sealer and see if that keeps the cracks going. You can see this bowl has started to dry, and so far no serious cracks or anything going on there. And this is just the backside covered in anchor seal. And in the case of a conventional bowl, I did the rim too, but not the inside. So here on this one though, because it's natural edge, I don't want to get sealer on top of my bark, because I want to be able. That's going to be part of my final product. So I have to be a little bit careful when I seal this one, not to get it on the bark itself. Alright, there it is. That's the roughed out bowl. I'll store this upside down and probably take about 6 months to dry, since I didn't alcohol dry it. Like I said, I've got so many bowls, blanks dried, ready to go. But when this is ready, I can mount it back on a lathe, and we'll do another video and show how I finish this off. You notice, even though I didn't try to make the wings even, the high wings are fairly even. The low parts, one side's a little bit lower, but like I said, I kind of like that asymmetric view. I can even imagine the lower part being where you reach into the bowl. You have that little bit of extra clearance. The only thing I wish I had done, tried at least, was I had forgotten that this apple tree had an offset pith, and so the heartwood didn't come out right in the center of the bowl. So the next two natural lids, I did try to get in the bottom, and it turned out to be trickier than I thought. I tried 2 techniques, and both times I had the heartwood centered on the bottom of the bowl, but by the time it reached the inside of the bowl, it had moved already. And same with the second technique. It's nice and centered on the bottom, but when I get on the inside, it's just to the center, one side of the center. Maybe when these get remounted after they dry and I thin them out, I might cut away enough material and it will come back to the center. We'll have to see. So that's my bit on roughing out natural edge bowls. So until next time, stay safe in your shop, and thanks for watching.